So, Nicotine, thanks for your response. I'm glad that we agree on so much, like that consciousness is a process and not a substance or a thing of some kind. It's not like in the skull. Um, I mean, you didn't go this far, but when I say consciousness is a process, what I mean is that um, it's part of what emerges in this system um, of exchange or of behavioral call and response that goes on between you, me, the world around us. Um, Consciousness emerges out of that whole goings on, and um, certainly this node in within that process, in other words, this brain, um, plays a very intricate role in how it emerges, the larger consciousness process. Um, but there isn't. It's not as though some substance is produced, sort of floating on the top of the neurons within the skull, that is consciousness. Um, it's a field phenomenon that is in process. So the field isn't like some sort of more ephemeral substance that's sort of you know like we normally consider matter to be. It's not an energy. It's a it's a conscious psychic um, experiential connection that even to use the word connection, it's like our language is of itself always going to be um, based in a substance ontology where there are things and qualities that can be assigned to these things. It's just the structure of our sentences. But when we say consciousness is a process, we're trying to point to something that our language can't quite describe, but that we constantly experience in a pre-verbal way, which is really, it's language that makes um, introspective peer review so difficult, because how do I know that when I describe a certain pre-verbal experience um, using a particular word, that you'll understand the word in the same way that I mean it? The signifier, the word that I use, that we share in a common language, isn't always tied to the same signified, which is an experience that I have. It appears privately, and that you have privately. So there's this question of how do we gain intersubjective knowledge of something private? Um, and this is really a question we can only begin to answer introspectively. So even to engage in this inquiry, this very, it would seem, surface inquiry, um, even to begin introspecting, you're already performing um, some introspection. Um, and really, if science excludes all forms of introspection, which logic, mathematics, they make sense. The symbols that we write down make sense. The measurements that we make sense because we understand them symbolically. Um, if we take that component out of science, what we're left with is, um, basically practical, um, empirical know-how, technology, basically. Not even that complex technology, because you need math in order to, and logic in order to get computers to work. Um, so science has already got an introspective component. It's just checked by this experimental, um, very much out in the open sort of methodological element. So we don't really have that when we're doing introspection. All we have is our shared presence and our language. And the question is really, what is private and what is public about subjectivity? Is it all private? It can't all be private, because we've all, I think, had experiences where we share um, in the presence of others, where there is a shared element of our experience, maybe not entirely. There does seem to be something um, private, something withheld, but not everything. There is some degree of overlapping um, subjectivity, and I think it's a very difficult um, boundary to clearly demarcate, and it may always be shifting throughout the day, throughout our lives, and there may be certain techniques we could employ that would allow us to gain some measure um, of, of input, if not control, over how this boundary actually shifts. Um, so, an introspective science, or a first-person science, if there could be such a thing, would be necessarily transformative, because you would be engaging a community of others, um, while at the same time engaging yourself. Um, and you would need a method to do this, and any method of inquiry, of introspective inquiry, is going to be um, it's going to aim at a certain goal, whether it be greater well-being, happiness, mindfulness, compassion, if these are Buddhist forms of meditation. Um, First-person science is no longer making a distinction between facts and values, um, because in reflecting upon your experience in a certain way among others, in a community, you are going to change yourself. Um, and of course, scientists do this too. They enter into um, certain fields, certain types of biology, molecular biology, evolutionary biology, developmental biology, um, and each of them develop their own languages and their own methods of experimentation and their own paradigms. And sometimes they may communicate with other fields, but usually they specialize, and they end up changing. Um, they end up changing their own basic assumptions about the larger world based on their narrow field of specialization. This seems to be inevitable, um, but there do seem to be directions we can take with our inquiry that don't necessarily pigeonhole us. Um, so, if anything, I would say first-person science is something that everyone should attempt um, to practice, and you have to attempt to do it, but it doesn't mean you don't pay attention also to regular empirical third-person science. Now, the question about efficient causality, I think if we reduce everything to efficient causality, we no longer have an explanation for the direction of time. Um, because, there are the laws of thermodynamics within physics, and they are a statistical law, and they're the most metaphysical of the laws in physics, because there's no proof of their truth. They're sort of just a description. They're this is how it has happened so far. And the second law, which talks about entropy, some would argue, and I would be one who would. Some would argue that the second law is evidence of the irreversibility of time. And as soon as you talk about time as irreversible, that means it has a direction. And we say that its direction is toward entropy, but entropy is also the source of order, of complexity. Contained within it is that it's opposite. And so as the universe moves towards greater entropy, it's also opening up pockets of amazingly of amazing complexity, such as life on Earth, intelligent life. So entropy is a final cause in a way. I'll talk about that in part